system and provide solvency. And the members of the board admitted and agreed that as of today, they have yet to respond to the request of the tenants of the mall. You cannot run a business like that. You cannot run a shopping facility or a mall like that. And so we believe that to rebrand the mall, and I've talked about this in my State of the Territory messages in the past, to rebrand the mall and to get its value up and to drive more revenues, we believe it is important in terms of salvaging and creating solvency at the government employees retirement system. The hotel project at Haven site is again a part of this process for driving monies to GRS. And I'm going to be signing that agreement hopefully this week or next week, and I will be forwarding the agreement between the hotel operators and investors to the legislature, because I'm informed by the legislature that they are in fact going to schedule hearings on these projects so that they can make a decision, because some of these projects are time sensitive. But Qualcomm, which is a manufacturer of modular systems, of building hotels globally, this is the first time that they will be in the Caribbean region, and has agreed to look at St. Thomas as its first Caribbean site for the construction of this hotel. They do these hotels in Dubai, they do them in New York, and in other areas around the world, and they're seeking to do a 110-room facility here on St. Thomas, and we tremendously support that. We believe that the $10 million loan that we're putting on the table, that is in a senior position and protected, its interest rate of 5.75% of that money coming back to the people of the Virgin Islands, 5% of the gross revenues, and 7.5% of the equity value of the hotel if it's sold, and the fact that the government, we cannot be bought out of the project for the first 5 years, so that we know we have a steady flow of interest payments on that $10 million for the first 5 years. Those dollars too are directed under this rubric to go to the government employees retirement system, and it is not part of the 5 years that the actuaries are estimating that will be added in terms of solvency time to the government employees retirement system. So we want to be very, very clear that our work with ArcLight Capital is one of a continued agreement to generate significant revenues to the government, to generate jobs and economic activity to the public, and generate an environment where people can go into business and be in business and have their businesses supported by the operations of the Lime Tree Bay refinery operations and the storage terminal facility. The Commissioner of Police is here, Delroy Richards, and we're here this morning to announce in the territory our first joint class, and Commissioner Richards will speak to that. On August 6th, we're going to be training all of the police recruits, St. Croix, St. Thomas, and St. John, on the island of St. Croix. The recruits from St. Thomas and St. John will be taken over to St. Croix on Sunday, and they've set up an entire training facility within the Virgin Islands National Guard. And then we're going to be utilizing trainers from the International Associations of Chiefs of Police, along with the trainers at the Virgin Islands Academy. And during the next 6 months, we're going to be doing intensive training out there of this class. And I believe this class is one of our largest classes that we're going to be launching. And this process will also allow us to have trainers train the senior officers in specialized areas in the VIPD. So I'd like to ask Commissioner Richards to give some comment to what we're going to be doing starting on Sunday.
I think I need a mic.
No, you have to. You don't even need the mic. You need the mic.
Good morning again to everyone. Yes, on Sunday, we will be transporting the recruits from St. Thomas to St. Croix at the National Guard facility. We will be hosting our joint recruit class beginning on the Monday at the VI National Guard facility. They'll be deemed 18-2, class 18-2, class 18-1 is already being trained. In each district, 18-2 will be the centralized class. What's going to happen is, for some time now, we've been engage in discussions with off-island trainers, especially from the International Association of Chiefs of Police. We should have some of those trainers in the territory within the next coming weeks. They're going to train with the local police cadres or trainers, work with them, provide training to the recruit, provide training to my senior staff and my supervisors from within the department, and do the total assessment of the training needs within the territory, and they will travel back to the mainland, and other trainers will follow. The idea, obviously, is to provide a police department that's second to none in the nation. And I think the training capabilities of our folks in the territory also falls in that category. Those training, like I said, will begin next week, Monday. So they will be housed at the academy, which is the National Guard facility. They'll be bunking there. Obviously, like I said, the training begins on Monday.
How many are you going to have in the class?
Okay, in the two classes that I now have, I have the first one, 18-1. I have about 25 peace officer candidates in that class. And when I say peace officer, because that's what they're called in the academy until they're certified after the training. And then the 18-2, I have close to about 23 peace officer candidates in that class or recruits. What's going to follow that is we also have background investigations being conducted as we speak to about almost 50 other candidates. Upon completion, we're doing pre-screening, we're doing physical agility exams, we're doing psychologicals. We want to have 18-3. The idea is to have as much police officers back in the street as possible. And we intend to convene 18-3 as soon as the numbers are ready. Okay.
And we have an announcement that we think will help you today.
Okay, good.
All right. That brings us to the third item on the agenda. We've been I want to point out that none of the things that we're doing or discussing or announcing have been done in the last several weeks. These are processes and projects that the refinery, for example, was over 2 years. The issues in terms of getting that kind of investment, in terms of working on the issues with the government employees retirement system, I spoke about it several times in my State of the Territory message, at least 18 months minimally. Today, I'm going to be signing, or I have signed, the Lieutenant Governor and I have signed an executive order to provide for the implementation of new starting base salaries for employees and critical hire positions in the executive branch of the government of the Virgin Islands of the United States. As you are aware, in 2015, we signed into law Senator Ford's bill, and given Senator Ford due credit for his work, his bill to raise the minimum pay in the private sector. The government's minimum wages have always been higher than that in the private sector. It was at $20,000, and we raised the minimum pay in the private sector by $3.35 per hour, where the last phase of the implementation of those wage increases went into effect June 1 of this year at $10.50 per hour. Today's executive order will now do the same thing in the public sector, moving the base wage of government workers in the public sector from $10.50 to $13, taking into account what the salary was at $20,000 per year, and moving that wage to now would be $27,040, or again the concomitant accumulation of $3.39 per hour to round it off at $13. This executive order takes effect on August 1, 2017. The critical hire, 2018, the critical hire positions that will also be affected, and this has to do with our recruitment issues, and a number of folks have been expecting this announcement. that the starting base salary for teachers of the Department of Education, meeting all qualifications, will now be at $44,000 per year from what it was at $34,000 per year. The Virgin Islands Fire Services, the starting base pay for firefighter recruits, which was at $28,000 per year, is now going to go to $33,000 per year. And when the firefighter completes their probationary period, their base wages will go to $38,000 per year. Firefighters who, and this is not restricted to new firefighters, but firefighters below the rank of captain who complete and maintain an annual certification as a registered emergency medical technician basic shall receive an additional $4,500 per year on their salary and a $500 stipend to maintain their EMT bag that will be prescribed by the Commissioner of the Department of Health. In the changing of the base wages of these positions, any employee that is in the government now that are under these new minimum base wages, the director of the Division of Personnel will move them to the new minimum salary. So in the case of teachers being paid under $44,000 will move to $44,000. Firefighters that are under $38,000 will move to $38,000. Firefighters who acquire the certification as a registered emergency medical technician will receive the additional $4,500. The Virgin Islands Bureau of Corrections, correction officers, starting base annual salary for cadets will be $35,000. Upon completing their probationary period, their base wage will go to $40,000. I know that the district court will be happy to hear that because that's been part of the issues raised in the consent decree of the government's inability to, in fact, attract and recruit correction officers, paying them $25,000 a year as an entrance salary. Again, those correction officers who achieve and maintain a registered emergency medical technician basic certification will also receive a $4,500 addition to their salary and the $500 stipend. Let me point out that if they lose the certification in any of these positions, because I'm going to name more, that stipend and that $4,500 salary increment will be removed from the salary. The Virgin Islands Department of Health, the starting base salary for registered emergency medical technicians basic will move from $29,100 to $35,159. The starting base salary for registered emergency medical technicians intermediate will move from $31,100 to $37,100. The starting base salary for registered emergency medical technicians paramedics will move from $35,140 to $41,140. Environmental officers employed by the Virgin Islands Department of Health will have their wages moved from $31,000 to $37,100. The Virgin Islands Department of Planning and Natural Resources, the salary for environmental officers recruits shall be at $33,000. Once the environmental officer recruit completes their probationary training, their salary shall move to $38,000. The environmental officer, the folks that works on boat and works out regulating our harbors and our shorelines, again, if they acquire the certification and maintain the certification as a registered emergency medical technician basic, they too will receive the $4,500 on their salary and the $500 stipend. The enforcement officer at the Department of Licensing and Consumer Affairs, as a recruit, their salary will be $33,000. Upon completing their probationary period, their salary shall move to $38,000 as well. Virgin Islands Police Department, We have moved their salary from $30,900. This has already been implemented for the recruitment campaign. $35,000 under probation, $40,900 after completing successfully probation. Also, police officers who achieve and maintain or acquire and maintain certification as a registered emergency medical technician basic will receive an additional $4,500 and the $500 stipend. On the various first responder agencies, it is not open for all of the first responders to simply become registered emergency medical technician basics. The director of the Bureau of Corrections, the commissioner of the Virgin Islands Police Department, the commissioner of the Department of Planning and Natural Resources, in 30 days will send me regulations, and they will set up a lotto system in terms of how many of their offices they need to be certified medical emergency technicians, and the process by which they will fairly select officers to be able to take that training. We are going to be conducting that training. I've directed the Commissioner of Health. We're going to enter into an agreement with Ryder Trauma Center in Miami, for which we will provide all of the training and the continuing education for registered emergency medical technicians and intermediates and paramedics. We started that before the hurricane, and again, the hurricanes interrupted that process. Another position that we have tremendous problems in terms of recruitment is under the Department of Human Services in terms of social workers. We simply are not getting qualified candidates to take the jobs as a social worker. And social workers require bachelor's degree and master's degree, and they're not coming to work for $30,000 a year. So a social worker 1, beginning August 1, will receive $45,130. Social worker 2, $49,455. Social worker 3, $54,180. Social worker 4, $57,395. Again, any social worker that's caught, what we like to say, underwater when you implement these new salaries will in fact see their salaries raised to the new minimums. The base starting salary for teachers employed by the Department of Human Services for the Head Start program will now move on parity with teachers at the Department of Education for the same qualification. We have teachers in the Head Start program that are equally as qualified and the same basic qualification as teachers in the Department of Education, and the base salary for a teacher in the Department of Education was $34,000, and the starting salary for a teacher at the Head Start program was under $30,000. And again, why can't we get teachers for the Head Start program? Because why would I teach for $27,000 when I can get a job for $34,000 if I'm interested in taking the job at $34,000? And so we're bringing teachers with equal qualification at DOE and Human Services on parity. We did the same thing with our nurses through a stipulated agreement. Nurses at the Department of Health, school nurses, and nurses at the Department of Human Services had 3 different levels of pay scales. And of course, Human Services can't acquire nurses for Herbert Grigg and the Queen Louise Home for the Aged, as well as LPNs and CNNs, because, again, the salaries were underwater. So through a stipulated agreement with their bargaining units, we are now able to announce that we've put those salaries all on parity and paying them adequate wages. As I said, the executive branch base minimum wage, so all workers in government, and there are about 542 of them, that makes the base minimum wage in the government prior to June 1, 20,000, now making $21,840, will now make $27,040, which is the difference in the $3.35 we applied in the private sector, now applying that in the public sector. I'm asking the heads of the judicial branch of government, the Supreme Court Chief Justice, and the President of the Legislature, as well as the governing authorities of our instrumentalities, to adopt similar base minimum wages in their respective branches, as well as in the instrumentalities. My executive order are primarily for the executive branch of government, and I'm asking them to do likewise there. It's about providing a living wage for workers in the Virgin Islands. And why and how does this all become possible? While we've been working on this, and we were really looking at teachers, firefighters, correction officers, social workers, the EMTs, is again, none of the revenues that are going to be derived from Lime Tree Bay facility is currently contained in the proposed fiscal 19 budget. And as you may know, the fiscal 19 budget provides for $131 million of new revenues as a result of the recovery and the projects that we are undertaking in the community. And so these revenues that we expect in the next year have to be added and quantified and added to this into our budgets that will be able to accommodate these changes in the salary, but more important, allow us the opportunity to drive our recruitment campaign forward. You know, we've been advertising on all of the papers of general circulation, the radios, the internet papers, trying to boost employment in the government. And we have a number of these positions. I think in the last school year, we had over 150 vacant positions for teachers alone in the Department of Education, trying to employ teachers at 34,000. This will allow the Department of Education now to go out and be robust in terms of its recruitment for teachers by raising the minimum payment for teachers. These salaries do not move across the entire government workforce, so that when we increase the base wage of a teacher for $10,000, every teacher in the Department of Education will not receive $10,000. Those persons who would be underneath or below the minimum base wage will receive the minimum base wage. And that will happen in Planning and Natural Resources, VIPD, Bureau of Corrections, Department of Health, Human Services, and the Department of Licensing and Consumer Affairs. I have amended and provided some thawing to the wage freeze that I had instituted pursuant to the Vaisa ruling of the Third Circuit Court, and gave the chief negotiator an opportunity to negotiate with unions in terms of a cost of living wage increase, again limited and dampened by the government's ability to pay the wage increases. I saw an ad in the paper this morning, and I am looking forward to my meeting with the United Steelworkers, and the ad isn't really accurate. It said that the last administration and this current administration has done nothing to raise wages in about 10 years. And that's just not accurate. In 2016, as a result of the first agreement with Lime Tree Bay Partners and what we had gotten out of our settlement with Hovenser, we implemented the negotiated agreements from the previous administration, of which the United Steelworkers were a part. And there were a number of employees, school monitors and other employees covered by the Steelworkers Agreement that received substantial wage increases as a result of the negotiated wages they got from the last administration. What did not happen was that the entrance salaries for many of these positions pretty much were being ignored. And so if you take a union like the Seafarers International Union, that union and their members have not seen wage increases for over 12 years, and a predominant share of their members are at the bottom tier of the government workforce in terms of making the minimum base wages that the government has been paying. And so we're going to negotiate, we're going to work these issues through. We're not going to do it beyond our ability to pay, but we're going to do them in a way that makes sense and where we have the money to fund them. And all of the new money that the government is receiving from the expansion of the economy can't go 100% to wages. It has to go to other issues affecting the community and services affecting the community in terms of the delivery of public services. So I think that's our three announcements today in terms of the clarifications of what our relationship with ArcLight Capital and Lime Tree Bay. As I said, we're in the energy business as a government. We're doing revenue sharing with our energy partner. And we will do, there are other projects that will be going on at the refinery that the government will be talking about with ArcLight Capital in the future. But under the current regimen, we're in a revenue share relationship. Commissioner, for you and your team at the VIPD, congratulations, and I look forward to coming out and visiting with the new class. That's, you know, getting that number over 50 is from the day when we couldn't even really recruit and get more than 15 or more folks or cadets in the class, and then lose about 20% of them by graduation, so we end up with 10 or 12 folks. That's a real good achievement, and we really appreciate that. So thank you very much. I think at this time, I've been looking at that clock as my guide, and I just realized that clock isn't working. So I'm still on schedule. So I'm ready to open up for any questions you may have.
All right. Everyone's good with VI Consortium. Good morning, Governor. Good morning.
Yes,
everyone.
I don't know if the radios are going to hear you.
Oh.
They didn't have another, Sandra, you didn't have a mic for the folks for the radio so that they could participate?
Okay. Okay. Good morning again, Governor. A few questions quickly. A lot of great announcements here, and we're looking at our live feed, and some people are really excited about pay raises for just across the government, the executive branch, and teachers as well. We are seeing a major concern here is how exactly is the government going to pay for those raises and sustain them in the upcoming years?
We're going to sustain them through the growth of the economy. For example, moving the base wage of the government workforce as a minimum wage, affecting, like I said, about 500, and let's just round it off and say 545 workers, cost the government $3.53 million, so $3.5 million. Bringing the teachers on up by 10,000 in terms of the minimum wage. The teachers that are underwater, and if we filled every vacant position, it would be $6.6 million. The majority of that money is already sitting in the budget, but we just simply don't have the bodies in which to put the folks into, because we fund those positions annually, but we don't fill them. Similarly, the VI Police Department, why were they able to move their wages from $30,000 to $40,900? Because of the quantum amount of vacancies, funded vacancies, that remain in their budget, but the lack of personnel to fill them. So what we every year we fund these positions, the social workers, the LPNs, the CNAs, we fund them, environmental officers, but we simply, folks, by the time the people that apply don't fully qualify, and the folks that qualify don't take the jobs, and that money just gets rolled over from budget to budget. When you take the monies that are going into the economy now from the Lime Tree Bay facility, when you take the money that we're estimating, which we said is 131 in the current for the new fiscal year 2019 budget from the reconstruction, and we will be having a press conference soon, a joint federal local press conference to announce what's going to happen with the health facilities in the territory, because we're just about finishing up with those assessments and know where we're going. FEMA has approved the permanent roof program as a part of the STEP program. I've already sent the instructions to the Virgin Islands Housing Finance Authority. People will not have to go and reapply again, but folks with blue roofs are going to see permanent roofs come on their homes. All of these kinds of dollars coming into the economy in terms of the recovery are what is going to drive the revenues forward that are going to be able to sustain these raises and bring government workers on board that we need for positions that we're funding for which we're not getting them filled.
And so, Governor, to be clear again here, so teachers make how much now?
Their base salary for teachers will be $44,000 a year.
Okay. And so you mentioned something. So if a teacher is currently making $44,000,
that's correct. They will see no change as a result of this one. Their change in salary will come at the bargaining table.
And the minimum wage across the board is how much is it?
$13 an hour. When you multiply that at 2,080 hours a year, you get $27,040.
And so is that higher than the private sector minimum wage?
The private sector minimum wage is $21,840.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Governor.
Good morning, Governor. Morning, O'Connor, Virgin Islands Daily News. I guess the first question I have is unrelated to the immediate announcements.
Sure.
One of the other actions that we've seen the legislature take recently relates to the state of emergency.
Yes.
Your proclamation says that we're still in a state of emergency, which seems a little bit like a snake chasing its tail.
It seems like a what?
A snake chasing its tail.
A state?
A snake.
A snake chasing its tail. Okay.
Yeah. So what about the particular powers that are enumerated under the emergency declaration are you able to use, and why do you need them?
All right. Very good. That's an excellent question, Brian, and I really want to thank you for it. I keep saying this. There are two state of emergencies. There are two state of emergency declarations affecting the Virgin Islands. A presidential federal state of emergency and a local state of emergency. What the state of emergencies do, like, for example, we excluded the price freeze out of the state of emergency. We recently excluded the PERB cases out of the state of the emergency. What the state of emergency does is it allows the Department of Property and Procurement to have truncated schedules on advertising and bidding of projects. Just like the federal state of emergency by the president allows the federal agencies to respond more timely to the needs of the disaster areas. So all 5 of the disaster areas from 2017 remain under presidential state of emergency, and the local state of emergency affects local law. It doesn't give the governor any superpowers that I can simply switch budgets around and things of that nature, but primarily what it does, it allows a truncated procurement process so that when we did the modular systems for the various schools, had we had to do that under a regular procurement process, it would have added 2 to 3 more months in the schedule, but under the state of emergency, it truncates those schedules. And we need that ability in terms as we go to recovery. What we're doing, what Virgin Islands Housing Finance Authority is going to be doing when we amend the contract to allow for the permanent roofing program. Again, if we were not under a state of emergency, that the feds would approve it, but to get that done inside the community would take a longer period of time. So we are just being consistent in terms of how you handle recovery from disasters and being in tandem and in lockstep. If the feds have us under a state of emergency so they can help us, excuse me, it seems innocuous that we should say, well, we're going back under our regular procurement process, and you rush aid to us, and we're simply going to take our time to spend it. And then the consequence to that is, remember, all of the recovery is on a time schedule. So there's a period where we have 100% funding by the federal government, then we go to 90% funding, and then we go to 75% funding. So if we want to go the long route and run the clock out, it's just simply going to cost us money, and we're not going to be able to respond the way we need to respond.
Okay, sorry. Do you have an estimated price tag for how much your executive order is going to cost?
No, I don't have a completed price tag because, again, what I have to do, and the budget office is going to be able to do that. They've been working with us on these numbers. They have to pull out the numbers that are already contained in the budget that will be exercised, and then what the actual new dollars are. So I could say, for example, when we change the base wage for entrance into the government to $13 an hour, that's an easy calculation because, you know, you have those positions, this is what you're going to have, and this is how much it costs. Why I can tell you 3.5. I could tell you education is $6.6 million on the teachers because, again, if you take all the funded vacancies and you take the teachers that are under 44,000, you add them together, you know it's 6.6. But you've got to remove from the money you have already been approved to spend out of the total number and say, here's what the new dollars are. And going into effect August 1 is, again, to drive for the Department of Education because they're really scrambling, trying to recruit teachers for the school year. The current budget would only require a pro rata share of the annual cost for August and September with the implementation of these changes.
Related to the refinery agreement?
Yes.
So it's a revenue sharing agreement, not a tax agreement?
Not a tax regimen agreement. That's correct.
To my knowledge, the company is exempted from virtually all forms of tax in the agreement.
Just like Hovensa was.
Yeah.
Right? Hovensa was exempted from every form of tax, paid you 2 cents a barrel, and paid you a $14 million annual pilot. That was it. And that was the end of it. It had nothing to do with margins. It had nothing to do with the calculation on the number of barrels that they produce. None of that stuff. That's all now in this agreement that moves, as I'm saying, from a $14 million base payment that Hovensa was paying on 600,000 barrels per day to when you add the refining and you add the storage terminal facility and the additional $5.5 million for storage, you're at $39 million a year at 200,000 barrels per day.
The final question relates to the sale of Haven site
yes.
to WICO. WICO has been effectively denying the public access to its financial accounting. The best that I can find are sometimes when there's an overall government audit, there is a reference in that to a cash negative position or asset negative position. How much of this is being done for WICO's benefit? And would you agree that the open access to the WICO folks would allow us to better assess the access?
The West Indian Company, like the Public Finance Authority, like Virgin Islands Next Generation Network, are blended component subsidiaries of the government of the Virgin Islands. They're business entities where the people of the Virgin Islands own 100% of its stock. They're not governmental agencies as property procurement or police or the office of the governor that's subjected to the procurement and the Open Statutes Act as they relate to the central government. These are business operations. And they were structured, I didn't put them together, they were structured this way so that they can conduct business in a business manner. The financial statements of the West Indian Company is a blended component piece of the overall financial statement of the government of the Virgin Islands. So you can go into the financial statements of the government of the Virgin Islands and find the balance sheets of the West Indian Company. The business in terms of how the company conducts itself and what the board believes are good for public edification or not is really a discretion of the entity and of the governing board. And if the law permits that and the law provides for that, I don't have any objection with it.
So then the question I have relates to the Third Circuit Court ruling, which said that for the purposes of the First Amendment related to employment, WICO is a government agency.
But it doesn't say that it's not a blended business and that the governing board cannot take business at hand and determine what it wants to release or not. It is owned 100% by the government and it has blended components of the government. But that ruling doesn't say that its books and all its papers are as free and clear and open as a governmental agency. Does it say that?
Not specifically to my knowledge.
Right. And that's just a consequence of the law. That's not a consequence of how any of us feel. I mean, you will continue to press your case, and I believe the Senate President said he would revisit the Sunshine Statute and look for some clarifications and amendments to it, and the legislature will make its determination there, and then we'll go from there.
They are a subsidiary of the PFA, though, right?
I'm sorry?
They are a subsidiary
yes,
of the PFA.
and the PFA. And the PFA is a blended business of the government.
So it's not within your purview to make these documents public?
No, it's not. That's why they have board of directors. That's why they have governing boards that have to vote. The subsidiary of WICO and Kings Alley Hotel all have governing boards. All right. I think one or two questions, and we have some. All right, we have. Go right ahead. You go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Governor, relative to the hotel deal, the new hotel you spoke of, you said you want to meet with the executives to sign up.
No, I'm saying we have concluded our negotiations on the term sheet of the government's involvement in the project. And in order to aid the legislature and the community in understanding clearly and concisely what the relationship of the government is with respect to this $10 million equity loan on the table, we have agreed to sign the documents and just simply add a caveat that they're subject to the funding of the legislature and submit them to the legislature so it can be a part of the deliberation.
So it's not preempting the legislature?
No. I could sign a deal with the company, but I won't have any $10 million to grant because the legislature has to authorize that funding. But so that there's not any question regarding what the terms and conditions of the loan are, we want to execute that and provide it to the legislature so that when Paul comes here to describe why the Virgin Islands is being viewed as one of the first places in the Caribbean it wants to do this project and what the project will bring, all of the documentation will be before the members of the legislature.
All right, last one, and this one is related to the bomb threat recently on St.
Yes.
Croix. We had some complaints, or some concerns rather, of community members that it took so long, or you had to fly in people from away to come and actually look at that. What if it were a real situation? How would that unfold, would you think?
I'm going to let the commissioner take that in, but we didn't let people fly in from I don't know how. We didn't let people fly in from away.
All right.
It was the bomb expertise from the Federal Bureau of Investigation that's stationed in Puerto Rico for issues like this having to do with Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. But I'll turn it over to the police commissioner.
Okay.
Yeah, morning again. Let me clarify a couple of things. The Virgin Islands Police Department some years ago had a bomb disposal unit. Most of the officers in that unit have since retired. We have started dialogue, and this is several months ago, or I would say back in 2017. We have begun conversation, in a sense, with some of the retired officers and also the federal government, okay, to rekindle a unit within the territory. What we have agreed upon in the interim is in the task forces, in the federal task forces, I have police officers. It is one of those officers that I relied on when we got the initial report to put the disposal and everything that goes along with it in motion. ATF was notified immediately as part of the agreement, and we have officers within those units. And the bomb disposal unit in Puerto Rico was immediately dispatched. Until we are able to fully put a bomb disposal unit back on the road, we're going to have to do that, because when we have a disposal unit, it takes years of training, because the bomb makers today are so sophisticated. That level of sophistication, okay, creates an issue. They can spot and they are able to relay what they have seen, but we don't have, okay, folks that are fully trained, okay, to dispose bombs. But we have a relationship, okay, and obviously it's with ATF and the other components who are actually on the island. They reached out for the additional resources to assist us.
Any idea as to how long it's going to take to get that bomb component, that squad?
But like I said before, we have begun the discussions last year. We've continued into this year. We're attempting to get the funding through Vitima to a school in Alabama to send selected officers to that particular school. I personally, I became engaged in the meetings with these individuals that I'm talking about. I personally.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay.
I want to add something to that, and I'm always getting myself in trouble, so what the hell, I might as well jump right into the deep end of the pool here. There's a bigger issue, and there are a lot of lessons to be learned from it, and we can see that 100%. But there's another issue here. Why is a day camp for children, teaching children to make pipe bombs and then trying to find them, that they could hide them, that they could fall off a truck, and create the kind of expense, not only to the government, but to the businesses in that area that had to close for all of those hours. Restaurants who were preparing food from early in the morning because of the crowd they have for lunchtime, only to be told at 9 a.m., you got to close your restaurant, turn your stove off, and get out of the building until the government can determine what kind of device that is. What is going on in a day camp with children that somehow we could be making those kinds of devices? What is the lesson that could be learned? I mean, I'm not being rhetorical here, but that's almost like having a day camp and you're telling the children, today the project is we're going to learn to rob a bank, and we're going to go find a bank and practice it. What is it that we're doing in the Virgin Islands? And then who pays the cost? The quantum cost. Even if you cut out the government's cost, who pays the quantum cost of the losses to the activity that was going on in that area in terms of commerce, in terms of jobs, and those things? So I think we want to have a whole good conversation. We will have to do what we need to do to get our act our game, step up on our game, if so to speak, and your ability to recruit more officers is going to help you be able to do that. We will provide the financial support to make sure it's done, but we need to have a wider conversation in this community of what we're exposing our children to. I have one more back here, and then we're going to call it quits.
All right, thank you. Just wanted to circle back on the pay for and sustaining these jobs. Obviously, I know
yes.
The number of dollars coming in for these jobs. You were saying it's due to the growth of the economy. Does it feel a bit premature that we don't know how much is this going to bring in just yet, or if it's kind of in our pocket just yet? Or,
No, it's not. It's not premature. And as I said, I've been working with the budget office on it. What I said is I didn't bring that to go through in my discussion. I know that members of the legislature are going to want this information almost post haste, and the budget office was going to provide it. What I was suggesting is that a good number of these dollars exist in the government budget because of the quantum amount of vacancies that we're funding from year to year that we aren't finding qualified individuals to fill. And I use the Department of Education as an example that in the current or the school year that just ended, they went through that school year with more than 150 teacher vacancies. So that when you take that 34,000 plus 30%, which is 40,000 of all-in costs, and multiply times 152 people, you get a sense of the kind of dollars you're talking about in terms of when we say, all right, we're gonna ramp this up, and it's going to cost $6.6 million for education just on the teacher changes in the teacher salary. You will see that a quantum share of that money is already sitting in the budget of the Department of Education. The police department was able to raise its minimum base wage by $40,900 from $30,000 and accommodate not only new police officers but all of the police officers who were making under $40,000 because, again, of the number of funded vacancies into the department that the money was sitting there, but they could not recruit the personnel to fill them.
So the vacancies should kind of supply the funding for the year ahead.
Plus the new revenues that we will apply to them. That's correct. Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. We really appreciate it, and thank you to the wonderful people of Virgin Islands. Lieutenant Governor, thank you very much. Thank you.
Sure.
Oh, and I think Nicole will provide you a press release and a copy of the executive order today, right, Nicole?
Yes.
Thank you.